Everyone, this is George here, and today we're going to be talking about the first MCU movie to ever come out. That's right, the first Iron Man film, directed by Jon Favreau. This came out in 2008, the same year The Dark Knight came out, and it stars Robert Downey Jr. as the iconic Tony Stark, aka Iron Man. And this came out at an interesting time, not just because it was the same year as The Dark Knight, but after Spider Man 2, it felt like we didn't have any good superhero movies to come out. Well, not superhero movies, but Marvel movies from 2005 to 2007. Spider-Man 2 was the last great comic book movie, well, Marvel movie that we got. We got Batman Begins in 2005, but that was DC. And I'm not saying that the Marvel movies we got in between Spider-Man 2 and Iron Man were terrible. Some of them were good in their own way. Like, I like Spider-Man 3. I think that's a fine movie. I know some people think X-Men The Last Stand is fine. But you also have movies like both Fantastic Four films and Ghost Rider that were not all that good. So Iron Man was basically gonna revitalize, in my opinion, the Marvel brand. And also you had Robert Downey Jr. who was revitalizing his career. He had a great performance in Kiss Kiss Bang Bang in 2005, directed by the Iron Man 3 director Shane Black, and that helped get him the role in this movie. And it's very hard to see anyone else playing Tony Stark other than Robert Downey Jr., or at least this version, because he is just so iconic. Like, right from the beginning of this film, he is Iron Man. He is Tony Stark. And I know there were like talks that like apparently the other actor that was up for the role was Tom Cruise. And Tom Cruise is a great actor and all, but it's hard to see Tom Cruise playing this version of Iron Man. Now, I know there's rumors that Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness could have an Iron Man variant, a superior Iron Man variant, and there's rumors that Tom Cruise could play him. And maybe he'll do a good job with the role, but with this version of Iron Man, like the main MCU timeline Iron Man, Robert Downey Jr. is it. He's done this character for 11 years, and in every film that he's been in, he's done a fantastic job. And in this film, you see him go on this journey. He starts off as this arrogant playboy billionaire that's reckless, doesn't seem to care about much. But once like he's held captive by the Ten Rings terrorist group, he sees soldiers and innocent people get killed by the very weapons that he created, and he sees the character Jensen, played by Sean Tobe, not just save his life, but also basically give his life to help Tony escape and help him build his first Iron Man suit. He decides to do something different. He decides to actually help the people, stop making weapons, and make the Iron Man suit to protect the people he wants endangered. And it's a great story of a second chance, a redemption, and it's a great character study in the superhero origin film. You also have Jeff Bridges as Obadiah Stane, the mentor to Tony Stark, and the way their relationship goes down from like Tony keeping Obadiah out of the blue, starting to suspect him, then he finds out Stane is basically selling weapons under the table, even though Tony wants to end weapons production. And then we find out that Stane had the Ten Rings, kidnapped Tony. That kind of betrayal, also, the way they handled it, I thought was great. I thought it was a great development throughout the film. I would have liked to have seen more Ironmonger action instead of waiting for the final fight, but they still handled it pretty well. And again, the suits, by the way, the Ironmonger suit, the Iron Man suits that they use, they look incredible. The special effects work on this film is incredible, in my opinion. But yeah, Stane's one of the better MCU villains, in my opinion. I also like Terrence Howard as Colonel Rhodes in this film. This is the only time he plays the character from Iron Man 2 to current. It's Don Cheadle that plays the role, and Don Cheadle does a pretty good job as well. But I think Terrence Howard was also very good. And then you have Gwyneth Paltrow as Pepper Potts, and I think this was probably Gwyneth Paltrow's best performance as Pepper Potts. I'm not saying she's bad in the later films, but I felt like she was probably at her best in this film. So yeah, the casting's great, and yeah, we also have the introduction of Clark Gregg as Agent Coulson in this film. who's who's been a prominent presence in Phase One, who was later in Agents of Shield. Like, yeah, this film set up a lot for the MCU. Like, not just like the post-credit scene where you see Samuel Jackson as Nick Fury, Iron Man base, Tony Stark saying "I am Iron Man" at the end. The Ten Rings still being prominent today with like movies like Shang-Chi, characters like Happy Hogan played by Jon Favreau still appearing in films like Spider-Man No Way Home, Colonel Rhodes still appearing in the MCU in Falcon and Winter Soldier, and later in his own show Armor Wars, and of course, like I said before, Clark Gregg having his own MCU show Agents of Shield. So this film really sets up a lot, and the thing is that this is one of the more grounded, more realistic MCU films. This is also a much more mature MCU film. It's still PG-13, but the tone obviously feels more mature compared to some of the later MCU movies. And part of that could be because this was distributed by Paramount Pictures. This was before Disney bought Marvel. So they were able to get away with some more stuff in this film. But yeah, like we've gotten so used to over the years since the first Avengers film, Tony Stark fighting against like world-ending threats like aliens, Ultron robots, Thanos. But yet in here he's taking on these terrorists that held him captive and are now terrorizing other people. And basically like this is like before the Avengers. Like he's like even though he's growing to care more about people, he still has that cocky, swift attitude. He likes to play his like heavy metal music. So like this was like before like the Avengers like came in and like his paranoia started to settle in. And so and yeah, like don't get me wrong, I love the grounded approach and realistic approach because as much as I love the big event films that we get, like the Avengers movies, the space movies like Guardians of the Galaxy, Thor Ragnarok, now the multiverse movies like Spider-Man No Way Home, and hopefully Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness is also another terrific MCU film that we get. I like the grounded approach that Iron Man goes because it feels kind of rare to have a grounded comic book movie nowadays. And again, this was one of the more realistic MCU movies. So, and I'm a fan of realistic comic book movies as well. Movies like the Batman, the Dark Knight trilogy. Like I love all kinds of comic book movies as long as I'm entertained and they're great movies. I think there's one thing about Iron Man that doesn't make the film bad. Like this is just an impact thing. The impact of Iron Man on later solo MCU movies, I do feel like has kind of hurt the MCU a little bit. And what I mean is them following the Iron Man formula with some of their movies like Ant-Man and Doctor Strange. I'm not saying they're bad movies, they're still good movies, but what are just good movies could have been better movies. Like when Iron Man did it the first time, it was unique, it was brilliant, it was fantastic. But when you see for example Ant-Man basically having a villain that's kind of like an evil version of Ant-Man in Yellow Jacket, similar to how Ironmonger was like an evil version of Iron Man, it kind of starts to get a little stale. And you want to see something a little bit new and see them try to do something more unique with their approach. So it kind of reminds me of like the impact Shrek would later have on later animated movies. I love the first Shrek. It's an incredible animated film. But some of the tropes that like Shrek created that you kind of see other animated movies do, it starts to get stale after a while. And it's kind of the same thing with Iron Man. And even like Sony's Marvel Universe is kind of following the same thing. Movies like Venom and Morbius, where the villains are essentially evil versions of the villain and they're kind of equal in power and stuff. You just want to see something kind of new with the villains. But again, like Obadiah Stane just stands out more than some of these other villains that kind of followed suit because he had a much more personal connection to Tony and the impact of betrayal would hit harder. But yeah, all in all, with the first Iron Man film, I still think it's a fantastic movie. It's probably my favorite Phase 1 movie in the MCU. I know some people will say the first Avengers is, and I love the first Avengers film, but the first Iron Man still has a special place in my heart. This is a top 3 superhero origin story for me. I think it's fun. It's got a great balance of light and dark moments. It knows when to be fun and hilarious. It knows when to be serious with its tone, which is something that I think the MCU needs to improve upon. We're starting to see improvement in that area, but back when the first Iron Man film came out, they knew how to be more serious when they needed to be. But yeah, brilliant cast, and it's hard to believe that this film like set up this big universe that we're now witnessing. And yeah, I'm gonna give the first Iron Man film an A plus. It's also a top 5 MCU movie for me. It's one of my top 5 favorite MCU films. So, what do you guys think about the first Iron Man film? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Do you think it's overrated? Do you think it's underrated? Is it your favorite Phase 1 movie? Is it one of your favorite MCU movies? Let me know in the comments down below. And I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like and subscribe already if you haven't. Please share this with someone that loves Iron Man and the MCU. And I hope to see you guys real soon. The next movie on this Marvel review series leading up to Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness is going to be Avengers Age of Ultron, because we see the Ultron bots in the trailer, and this was the introduction to Wanda Maximoff in the MCU. The first like official film she was in. So I want to get into that film since she's going to play a big role in the next Doctor Strange film. Take care, everyone.